Hello everyone, one more time. Thanks for joining. We're gonna just wait for Dr. Rachelle Sheeley to join us for my Instagram live. So if you can be a little bit patient, please. She's gonna be here in any minute and then we can start. And actually I would like to say to all of you, feel free to share any comments, or if you have any questions, just type them in and I'm gonna try my best to pass them to Dr. Sheeley so she can answer it. She's coming. I'm so excited.
Hello, Andrea.
Hello and welcome, Dr. Sheeley. I'm so happy to see you. How are
you as well.
Thank you for your time and joining us. I know that was not easy, but thanks for making it. I mean, I felt the way, like that way to call you and, you know, to introduce RDI a little bit more and talk live about RDI and what it's all about. And I really want to pass more to people, not just in the UK, but in Europe and in my country. So I would like to ask you, I have many questions for you, so not sure where to start from, but first of all, thank you for coming.
Oh, I'm so excited. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So first, I want to say everyone a little bit more about how do I know Dr. Sheeley, how did we and when did we get connected? Years ago when I found out about the RDI and I started to research more, and luckily at that time I decided to study, and Dr. Rachelle Sheeley was my mentor. So she's top one. She was the one who actually guided me through all my studying, and I learned a lot from her. Everything what I do today, I have to say it's thanks to you, Dr. Rachelle Sheeley. I wouldn't be where I'm now without you and your support, your help. So I think having, you know, in our field, working with people, with so important to have a person who you can learn from and who you can trust and feel safe, and the person who's gonna guide you. So it's not easy to find that person. So big thanks for all this.
Thank you for your comments, Andrea. I believe that what you have said is what we like to exhibit in RDI, that there's a parallel process in our teaching and in our parenting, and that is that we want everyone to feel competent, we want everybody to know what we're doing, and we want everyone to become independent of us. So we want our trainees to become independent of the trainers, and we want the parents to become independent of the trainees. And ultimately, we want the children and the young adults and the adults on the spectrum to become independent of their parents. The relationships can continue to exist, but we're looking for that that ability to be able to function on your own.
That's so true. And I can tell you many times this is missed. People are focused too much on the skills, and it's all about, like, you know, the child, these skills, it's so difficult to learn this skill and that skill, but actually about competence, what about that connection, what about independence in general?
And I think that when we talk about competence, it's important to understand what we mean in RDI about competence, because if you think about what you're looking for a child who's going to become an adult, we're not looking at whether the child can say the word cookie, although we all want cookies, but we're not looking for the ability to say the word cookie. We're looking for an ability to think, and we're looking for the kinds of skills that have to do with dynamic rather than static intelligence. And so from the very beginning, when we start working with a family, we begin there, working on the dynamic intelligence, on that feeling of competence, that feeling of agency. I can do it. I can move forward. So.
I agree. And it works. When you start that way, it works. It works for the family, for parents, and it works for the child as well.
Yeah.
So going back a little bit more, I would like you to tell all of us a little bit more about RDI. What is RDI? Who is it for? And what are the goals of RDI? And how do we work together with parents?
When my husband and I became interested in autism, it was the late 80s, early 90s. And at that time,
Dr. Gatz.
A long time ago. So the incidence at that time was 1 in 10,000. And it was simply, nobody knew what it was. Probably didn't even know how to spell it. But we became interested because he was at Texas Children's Hospital, which is a global hospital. And people come in from all around the world. And they were coming in with children that they didn't understand. And because he was on staff there, he was a lot of these children got referred to speech language, and then he, as a psychologist, was on that on that trajectory. And what he began to see was that the parents were actually doing the right things. They knew how to engage their children. They knew how to be important in their children's lives, but the children were not good apprentices to them. So in looking at what was out there in the field of autism, there was practically nothing. And what was there was very discouraging, because the people who were talking about autism were talking about a very grim future, or that you had to teach everybody everything, that they would never be able to think for themselves. So we looked at a couple of things. We looked at developmental literature to see what happens when development goes the way it's intended. And that was when we began to think about how parents guide their children all over the world. And it's the same. You know, whether you're living in China or India or Croatia or the United States, it's always the same. Parents guide their children. So we knew that we wanted to kind of reestablish for families where this was lost, what that guiding relationship would look like. And that was where we began. Did you want to say anything, or should I continue?
I wanted to stop you here for a little bit. And I talk a lot about guiding relationship, and to be honest, until RDI, and I've done a lot of studies, until RDI, that's the first time that I've heard about guiding relationship. And I remember when we had lectures once with you, when you started to talk about this, and then you said, okay, go home, and you gave us a homework to write down when I was guided as a child. And I made a list of things that my mom or my father guide me, and, you know, and when they would try to teach me different skills, like, you know, washing the dishes, like basic things, hoovering. And that was my link with the guiding relationship. Okay, with the neurotypicals, it happens in a very flowish way. So why not with children on spectrum?
So because of the autism, they have vulnerabilities, and they have vulnerabilities in the way they learn to think. And if you look at what your parents taught you, and, you know, I remember my grandmother, my parents teaching me the same things. You feel like, oh, I'm learning to iron, or I'm learning to wash the windows, or I'm learning to, you know, change the oil in the car. But actually what we're learning is we're learning to see the world through the eyes of our parents. And once we begin to see the world through the eyes of our parents, we begin to define who we are. And once we define who we are, we have a relationship with self that then allows us to have relationships with people in our family, friends, and then ultimately, you know, relationships as adults in marriage, that kind of thing.
Friendships,
yeah. Exactly.
Okay. So that was your start with RDI, and from there you moved to RDI. How did you call it RDI? How all that happened?
Well, we were doing RDI before we had a name for it, because what we would do was we would ask a family to go into a room and play with their child. And so we really wouldn't tell them anything to do. As you know, when we do our hypothesis testing now, we've kind of standardized that. And so we'll give parents a ball and say, just play with your child. But we would just have things out and we would say, go ahead and play. And we tried to see what was happening in that room and how we could go in and impact the ability of the child to be a good apprentice. So that was how we got started. There was no RDI, and there became an RDI when my husband wrote a book, Solving the Relationship Puzzle, and they said, what do you call what you do? And we looked at each other and said, what should we call this? And so that's when we came up with relationship development intervention.
But I like it, and it's so true, relationship development intervention. We do work on relationships, first on the relationship between parents and the child, and then all other relationships. Going back to RDI and my questions around this, I had a family today on Zoom, potential family, and they asked me a very interesting question. They said, so Andrea, when is the right time to start RDI?
The right time to start RDI is when you know to ask that question. It's never too early. I worked with a child who was 13 weeks old. Now, we would never diagnose anyone at that age, but the mother had a background in understanding autism, as did the grandmother, and they felt that something was off with this infant. And so I just gave them a few pointers. But because they were able to slow down everything they did, because they were not trying to get the child to do things, the child became very responsive. And so 13, usually it's more like you'll see a difference in 6 months, because 6 months, that's when you begin to see typically developing children go on to be growth seeking, and children who have autism are status maintaining. So about 6 months of age, you have a better idea of it. I've also worked with someone who's 62 years old.
So
it's not too late and it's not too early. And the reason for that is what we do is not having people become therapists with their children. We're helping them teach their children to be apprentices to them, just like your parents taught you to do all these things. And as they were teaching you that, they were growing your mind. That's what we're doing as well. We're growing the minds and the integration of the children's neurological system with these everyday things that we do.
With everyday life.
Every day.
Basically how to live with children on spectrum 24/7. So how to use the best, every momentum, every situation which you go through with your child to help them to solve the problems, to think logically, to get functional language out, to get independency, but through everyday actions and activities. Going back to the diagnosis, and I know that many parents, they do struggle with that moment, and this is one part which I really like about RDI. You and Dr. Gadsden, you both spend a lot of time talking about the momentum from when parents get the diagnosis and then that shock trauma stage and how to get out of that loop and move on. Can you tell a little bit more? Many parents, they do ask me, like, what shall we do first? They feel like they have to do everything. They seek for all the support on the world, and at the end they get disappointed. So please, few words around this. How do you see all this? How do we approach this through RDI? And yeah.
I'm going to try to keep it in few words. Well, I, as a mother and a grandmother, I know that the hardest thing to ever hear is that your child is struggling with something that may or may not end up okay. And so there's a trauma associated with that. And our natural tendency is to go out and, as you said, do everything, leave no stone unturned, which is actually the worst thing you can do for a child who's vulnerable, because it wears them out and they don't have any time to do the important things, the important things are those things that are necessary to become a good guide to you. So the first thing we ask parents to do is slow down and take the pressure off. That what we're going to do is we're going to have the child become a good apprentice to you. And in becoming a good apprentice, if you slow down, then you will speed up. You'll never get anywhere because you're always going to be operating as if you're in chaos.
So the answer is, first you have to slow down.
Yes. And by slowing down, it's hard because we're all modern people, and we go 100 miles an hour all day long. We don't slow down for anything. I mean, I can't tell you, Andrea, how many parents, when I say to them, well, why don't you do this after dinner? And they say, we'll just grab something. So the things that I grew up with as standard fare are things that parents have to sometimes make a commitment to do. And I remember a study that was done in the 50s saying that because everybody was going to be working, they felt they were seeing in America the last generation of competent children.
Oh, wow. Because
everybody was going so fast. So if you have a child on the spectrum, it becomes even more important that you take time to do with your child, the things that support your family.
And if you don't slow down, I talk about this every day with parents, slowing down, and it is hard. It's hard to slow down in a way to just be present in a moment, to see what is difficult for your child. We don't see that often, and that's the moment where anxiety comes in, because it's too difficult. We see that it's too difficult, and we don't know how to break things down to guide the child through this difficult moment and help him to learn and to achieve something and to become competent and independent again. So it's a very, very important word, slow down. How do we do that?
Well, the first thing I do is I refer everybody to you, because you can teach them yoga.
Oh.
So you can do yoga with families, and everybody will slow down.
Still parents, but something about it. But thank you. But definitely, yes, mindfulness takes place here, and I think it helps a lot. It helps me. I have to say that, I practice for myself, and I would never be able to achieve so much with parents if I would not slow down. And again, this is all linked to being model. So we want to teach parents to be model for their children, but me as an RDI consultant, I model for parents, and it goes in a circle. So mindfulness,
it does go, yeah.
But sport is also very important, I think. To stay active, it helps a lot, and keep balance. That's something what we talk about in RDI a lot. You taught me a lot about keeping balance. It's so important. Can you tell a little bit more to all parents and educators? I believe we have educators here as well to explain a little bit more how do we act when we don't have balance, and how much children can feel when we are in this balance. And yeah, please.
I think we do that in a couple of ways, Andrea. One is we talk a lot about regulatory patterns. And if you think about what happens in infancy, there are regulatory patterns that exist between the parent and the infant. And they're typically physical. Now, we can't play peekaboo with a 10-year-old or a 32-year-old. But what we can do is we can begin to get in sync without making demands on people. So I think that that's the first thing. And then I think the other thing that we do is we ask the parents, I ask my parents two things. What do you like to do? And what do you have to do? And I remember a dad looking at me one time. He had this look on his face because I knew his wife had made him come. And I said, what do you like to do? And he said, I like to golf. And I said, perfect. I said, we can use golfing to work on almost every objective we need to work on with your son. And then I said to the mother, what do you like to do? And she said, well, I like to get my nails done. I said, we could probably do that too. But we began to talk about the things they had to do to help their family function. They had to cook, they had to do some cleaning in the house, and all of these things can be used to work on objectives. So we're not saying to the parents, you have to set aside 3 hours a day to work with your child. If you do that, you're speeding everything up. Everything is happening more quickly and everybody's exhausted. But if I'm cooking dinner and I say to Johnny, stand on the stepladder and help mommy stir the batter, I have to do that anyway. But I now have a regulatory pattern going with my child that not only teaches him to have self-regulation in terms of our co-regulation, but he's seeing that he's important to the functioning of our family. He sees himself as competent, as having purpose in the family, not somebody who's having something done to him.
Yeah, and who is just by the side. He has his own role, and we all we all humans, and it matters to all of us to have roles. And I think that having purpose keeps us going, right? Without purpose, and many times, on many occasions, I've seen that actually that purpose has been taken from children on spectrum.
I think it has. And if you think about, just think about you and me, how good we feel when we figure something out. Well, that's what we do in RDI. We set up these small challenges that the child has never learned to do, and then we let the child figure that out. It's almost like magic when that happens, because the child begins to see, I'm smart. I figured out what to do. And the parent is saying, wow, you're smart. You figured out what to do. So the rewards, rather than coming from the outside, they're intrinsic rewards. The child feels rewarded because he has used his own brain to figure things out. And that's the competence that we keep talking about.
It's inner motivation. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? You already started, but just if you can explain a little bit more the difference between external reward and inner motivation or inner reward. I think that that's something what many parents and educators, they struggle with a lot. And to be honest, I stopped using, when I started with RDI, I stopped using any outside rewards with children. And I can tell you that, even with kids who I thought, there is no way, I need to give them something to follow up. Need them, and they started to work on inner motivation, and it's just great.
I think that, it's an interesting question, because I would say that when we give feedback, we spotlight something.
Yeah.
And we spotlight the objective that we're working on at the time. And we have probably 1,000 objectives. We've got a lot of objectives. So we're objective driven, and we're also hypothesis driven. If I give this kind of support, I'll see the child capable of doing this sort of thing. So when we think about that, we have to ask ourselves, what are we spotlighting here? And an external reward might be, maybe like a piece of candy, like for, oh, I like the way you said the word candy. And so you give a reward. But in RDI, the closest I would come to an external motivation that would increase the child's innate motivation coming out would be to say something like, oh, you figured that out. You are so smart. Oh, I like the way you're thinking. And that's a very different kind of feedback because it's based on the objective and it's not based on the activity. If that...
Yes, absolutely. I totally understand what you're talking about, and I hope it was clear for others. But what I want to say, feel free to ask questions, anyone who's here with us. And I'm happy to pass them to Dr. Sheeley, and I'm sure she's going to answer them. We have here one, how to learn to slow down. But we already talk about this a little bit. I don't know if you want to on the top, Dr. Sheeley.
Well, I think, we talked about how you would do it, but I think the first step of that is understanding that you have a vulnerable child. And in order to help this child move forward, you have to slow down so that the child can understand what you're doing. So it's using fewer words, using nonverbal expression, gesture, giving the child time to absorb that means that you've slowed down because we assume that all of that comes in a package. When I'm talking, you hear the tone of my voice, the expression on my face, and God only knows what kind of gesturing I'm using. So the slowing down comes with an intentional desire to do it and to understand the reason why you're doing it.
Okay, thank you so much for this. Next one, what about the families? Once when the autism comes into their family, what would you advise for other family members? Every day I receive many questions on these topics when grandparents they struggle with this, or siblings, or how to take further all this, and we know that they need support as well. So it's not just about parents, autism affects the whole family and they all need that support. How do you see this, and what would you advise?
Yeah, I feel like one of the first things that we say to families when they become involved with RDI is we don't want the siblings of the child who has autism to feel that the child with the problem got everything, got all of your attention, all of your resources, and all of your time. So we want parents to consciously think about the children, all of their children. We want all of the children to get equal time. And while we don't want to turn the siblings into therapists, we don't want the parents to be therapists either. We do want the siblings to be able to maybe do some things with the child that the parents are exploring. And so this is like a really beginning example. I had a father who had his son standing on a bed and he was going jump, 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 jump. And then he was stopping and the child was going and the dad was going. So they were having this conversation about whether they would jump some more. The brother was standing like 3 feet away. And the dad smiled at the child that he was jumping up and down, and he gave the brother his turn. And so the brother jumped up and down. Now, that was an amazing thing to do for both the brother, but also the child who had autism, because the child who had autism was watching his parent with his brother. And a few weeks later, I saw this boy say to a younger sister, and he pushed her on the skateboard. I mean, but you could see how what had happened had such deep meaning for him that then he was able to do it with a sibling. So we don't want anybody left behind, and we don't want anybody to feel like they're having things done to them, including the child on the spectrum. We want it to be invitational, and we want everybody to have meaning in the family, especially the parents. So if I see parents who don't have time for each other, I'll say, this week your assignment is to go on a date. And this is about how you connect. It's not necessarily about the regulatory pattern. It's about that connection, that psychological, that emotional connection that helps the child move forward.
How would you describe connection?
I'm sorry?
How would you describe connection? I mean, we talk a lot about connection, but what is connection?
I have to say that for me, I feel a connection. And when I'm with the child and I'm doing something and I feel like, this is not going to be very scientific, I'm having fun. If I feel like I'm having fun, I know I'm not working 100% to make this happen. I'm having fun because the child is having fun too, or the child is understanding what we're doing and is carrying his own weight. So when I talk about a connection, I believe there is a feeling, and I feel like I think all of us know what it feels like to be connected with someone else. I mean, even over when I'm talking with a family on Zoom, and I actually do everything on Zoom now, when I'm doing that, I feel the connection. I also feel when a disconnection has happened. And it's at that point that I need to either ask the family about it, or I need to step back. It means that I've gone too fast, too quickly, and we're doing something that the child doesn't understand. So I just back up. And we talk about the edge +1, and we talk about the edge -1. Edge -1 isn't passive. It's where we can go back and regroup.
Yes, with parents and with children.
And with ourselves. With ourselves, we need to be easy on ourselves too. And if we don't get it right, or if there's a problem with what we do, we have to say, let me go back and think about it, or let me go back and look at the video that I made because I had the wrong amount or the wrong kind of support. And in the beginning, we put a lot of time into the sort of support that a child would need.
Yes, that's, I think, over-prompting is one big topic, and it happens a lot. It happened to me so many times in the past, and I wish that at that time I had knowledge which I have these days, and being able to see what child is capable to do it, and knowing how to break things down for a child. But yeah, when we help them too much or over-prompt, children don't learn. We don't give them that space to think.
Andrea, I love what you're saying because you're really going to the heart of something that's, I think, a huge issue in the area of autism. And that is that for reasons, actually none of us understand that much, we might have a child who suddenly just tantrums. And the parents learn to avoid those tantrums. And so the parents, because they've learned to avoid tantrums or get the child to do things, they begin to overcompensate. And a lot of times when I'm working with a family in RDI, I'll realize that the child has moved way beyond what the parents anticipated, understand, or have observed. And I'll just say, let's step back for a minute and see what Johnny can do. And the parents are shocked because Johnny doesn't need that compensation or that support anymore because he understands it. And he might be a little bit slower, but he understands it, and he'll get faster.
Yes. Thank you so much for this, and thank you for all your kind words. They mean to me a lot. very quickly, because we are running out of time, but I want to touch a few more questions here. Declarative language. I love it. Can you tell a little bit more about declarative language and how much it can help children on spectrum? So the way how we approach, how we talk to them. When I say we, I mean adults around children, either parents or educators or family members.
I think there's a tendency when you have a child who doesn't talk to try to get the child to respond to you, say anything like, what's your favorite color, or what's your name, or how old are you, or do you have a dog? Because we just want to hear their voices. So for all the right reasons, we actually do the wrong things. And I don't mean wrong in terms of terrible, but there's a better way to do it. Rather than interrogating a child with questions, we become very invitational. And we don't actually have in our minds what that child should say. So let me give you an example. I pick my child up at school and I say, what did you do today? And the child says, nothing. I don't care if the child's on the spectrum or not. I say, nothing. But there's a different way to find out. And the reason parents ask that question is they're so happy to see their child and they want to connect. So you might say, I missed you today. I don't even know what you did. And then you just wait. And if the child doesn't answer, that's okay. Because maybe he's telling us he doesn't actually have that kind of memory to remember, and we have to spend some time working on memory. But if he says something like, fireman? Wow, fireman. I wish I could see a fireman. So we're not constantly trying to get information from the child. And if we really want to know more about that fireman, we can email the teacher and say, did a fireman come to school? Did you study firemen? Did you have a play area with firemen? Did you pretend to put out fires? Did you read a book about a fireman? So we can follow up if we want it, but the declarative language is just invitational.
And I like the way how you said it's, parents, they want to connect with a child. They want to, and they have that desire. They want their children to respond. They want them to share what happened at school, for instance. But on the other side, we do have this child who struggles with functional language. And if we just question, we increasing their anxiety. I would feel anxious if I would be in their shoes as well. So we need to start to think different way, how we can help them, to how we can model for them and be them example instead of question, because through that they don't learn and they just get more anxious.
That's right. They do get more anxious. And if you think about it, a lot of times we get anxious too if people start asking us questions, because the assumption is if you ask me a question, you might be asking me because there's a right answer. Now, if I were to ask you a question, it would be because I'm curious. Or if you ask me a question, we're curious. Yeah. But the child might not realize that, might think there's a right answer to this. What's the right answer?
But you see, interestingly, like with neurotypicals, with my friends, I don't ask them many questions. It's maybe 20%. We the conversation flows.
Yeah, that's right. That's exactly right. And so with a child on the spectrum, we're looking at kids who are almost always asked questions. They're asked questions at school. They're asked questions with their parents. I mean, Andrea, if I said to you, I'm having green beans for lunch, you're going to start saying to me, oh, are you going out for lunch? Do you like to cook? There are all these kinds of things that might be in response to that. So I will say the same things to a child or an adult on the spectrum, and then I just wait. And I have trained myself to wait at least a minute.
It's fascinating. I have some students, you know, it takes them 50 seconds to get back to me. But I've learned that skill, and I'm telling to every single parent that's a skill which you have to learn. And it comes through slowing down, to being able to wait, give the child that processing time. We all know they need extra time to think, to solve the problem, to come up with the answer. Yeah. And it comes through slowing down, to being able to wait, give the child that processing time. We all know they need extra time to think, to solve the problem, to come up with the answer. Yeah. And
that's right. And what has surprised me is that with the young adults, a lot of times, if I understand this slowing down, and if I give them the time, I'll start to hear someone who has deep thoughts, philosophical ideas. I mean, they really are thinking about the universe. And you would never know that if you continued to question them and to continue to try to get them to talk to you. So the first question that was asked was, how do we slow down? We've come full circle now. This is how you slow down. You give yourself time and you give your child time.
Like that, I have to write this down. You give yourself time and your child as well. Yeah. Another question: teens, adults, and autism. Where is the future? I want to share this. I was yesterday with a friend of mine. We had lunch, and she asked what is happening with young people on spectrum in UK. And I just look at her. I said to her, they don't have a job. That's right. They don't have a job. They just stay at home, which is not right at all. And, I just want to see and share with you, what are your thoughts? And obviously you've seen so many adults and teens, children on spectrum. What is the situation, and what advice do you have for parents who maybe now have a child who is 5 years old or 2 years old, what to focus on? Because those children, they're going to become adults soon and time is flying. So what approach to take, what to teach them, what goals to set up?
Andrea, I'm so glad you asked that question, because it's so fundamental to the work that my husband and I developed 30 years ago.
Oh, RDI.
Yeah. So one of the things that we did was we asked the question, if somebody's going to have a quality of life, which means employment, friendships, marriage, that kind of, if they're going to have that quality of life, what do they need to be able to do? And I'm going to tell you this list because it's fundamental to every single thing we do in RDI. The Canada Board of Employment had a list at that time for what was going to be important in the 21st century. We're in the 21st century now. But these are the things they said that employers are looking for: problem solving, flexibility, teamwork, relationship building, analysis and appraisal, perspective taking, self-awareness, ongoing growth, uncertainty management, creativity, and innovation. If you think about that list, even though they're talking about employment, those are the things that you also need for a relationship. And when we saw the list, we thought, this is exactly what people who are vulnerable because of autism cannot do. So everything we do is looking at the age of 21. What will the well-being, the level of independence, what will the relationships be for someone on the spectrum? And I'm so excited to tell you that we have a paper coming out very shortly where we were asked to answer that question for somebody, one person who had done RDI. Well, I went to Facebook and found 4 people. And the exciting thing is that they all have relationships. 3 of them have college degrees. One of them does not have a college degree, but he's got 27,000 followers on TikTok. And he talks about autism all the time. He's a great advocate. And then the other 3, they all have jobs, and the jobs are looking toward the future. 3 of them are not living at home. One of them is still living at home because he's trying to get enough money to be able to move out. But they're all at a level of independence that I think is very similar to the levels of independence we see right now, particularly after COVID and with everything that's happened for other people their age. And it was so exciting for me to see that. So that's what we're looking for. And we start that from the very beginning. If you're 2 years old, we're still working on those things.
So important. I recently started to work with one young man, and he put on his list what he would like to achieve through RDI therapy is to find a job and to become independent in terms to have his own place to live. And now you just reminded me with all the targets, and I truly believe through RDI we're gonna achieve that. I just wish that he could count to me earlier. It's
but
never...
But Andrea, I think that it's never too late. I think what makes it more difficult with someone who's older is that they've had life experiences that have made their lives harder. So we're not just dealing with autism now, we're dealing with co-occurring problems that also have to be dealt with. But I really do not believe it's ever too late.
Neither me. I think time is ticking out. We have to finish with we have few more minutes. I know that you have to go, that you're very busy, Dr. Sheeley. And if parents decide to go for RDI, where to start from?
Well, first of all, I would just give them a way to contact you. And so if you feel comfortable putting that up so that they can find out how to contact you, I think that would be great. If they would like to contact me, that would be great too. They can do that through our website, which is just RDI Connect. So either way, but I know that if parents are looking to get started, if they work with you, they're going to be in good hands. If I had a child, I would work with you.
Thank you so much for this. But the truth is, I do love my job, and I'm very passionate about my job. And I'm connected with families who I work with and children as well. So that's for sure. Thank you so much, Dr. Sheeley. I hope we're gonna have a chance to see each other soon again.
I hope so too.
Live or on a different occasion. But I hope it was very helpful for all the people who followed us in this Instagram live. And thank you for all questions. We have some great comments. And here, thank you, Dr. Sheeley, and thank you, Andrea, for bringing us a great guest tonight. So this is coming from... Thank you. And I
would also like to thank the professionals and parents who got on today. I can't tell you how much I appreciate everybody's effort and their empathy for the families that they're dealing with. If you're a parent, I don't want you to listen to all of the negative voices that talk about what can go wrong. I want you to have hope, and I want you to move forward knowing that you're the best person to work with your own child.
This is wonderful, and I feel the same. I feel our children have the best parents they could have to raise them, and I want to encourage everybody who was with us tonight to no matter which way you are at or which path you're choosing, you are the best parent for your child, and take that with you tonight.
I agree. Thank you for having me, Sonia. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Dr. Sheeley. All the best.
Okay. Bye now.
Bye.